On today's podcast, we're joined by French music supervisor Cesar Mathieu from Royal Sync. We discuss the state of sync in France today, what are some of the most unique licensing considerations in France, the role of music libraries in France, the role budget plays in music selection, and how much of an opportunity he sees for French music internationally, and much, much more. You don't want to miss it. Insiders, are you ready?
Welcome to MUBUTV's Music Business Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage artists and music business professionals who are dedicated to having a successful career in the new music industry. Here are your hosts, Ritch, Esra, and Eric Knight. Welcome back, Insiders, to another episode of the MUBUTV Music Business Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage your music career. On today's podcast, we welcome Cesar Mathieu, music supervisor at Royal Sync Music in France. We discuss the current state of sync and how music licensing works in France, the role music libraries have, and the opportunities for French music internationally. You don't want to miss it.
Welcome back, Insiders. Today, we sit down with music supervisor Cesar Mathieu. Cesar works in France, which I thought would be an interesting conversation to have regarding international music supervisors and to see and explore if the procedures or the ways of music in other countries, if it works differently than here in America or in other European territories. And it's interesting, when we talked about the state of sync in France, and very much, a lot of the rules and applications are exactly the same. They're looking to play, but it's grown, which was interesting in the conversation. It's grown. The opportunities for sync with regards to ads, in regards to movies, and so forth, is very interesting. One thing that they don't have, he says it's exactly the same as in America.
Right.
Unlike in England, where there is what's known as blanket licensing for like the BBC. So if the BBC makes a documentary on something, they can use music without having to license it specifically.
Right.
And I remember, certain artists have gotten very upset over that, but it's the law.
Right.
It's the law of that particular country.
That territory,
those kinds of things I thought were really interesting in terms of that.
Yeah, and I also thought the role of music libraries and how they play a role versus here in the U.S. I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah. The whole role of music libraries is somewhat, I felt in the conversation, it seems like it was more important.
Right.
It's slightly different than it is here in America. And also what he said about music being used more in media today in France, I thought was interesting. That's where, I got the whole concept from him about just the growth of sync within France and within, music being used on a more international basis.
And with that, Insiders, sit back, relax, and enjoy our feature conversation with Cesar Mathieu.
Cesar, welcome.
Hey, hi, hello, welcome.
How are you?
I'm going fine, thank you.
Good. I always like to begin these conversations by asking our guests, when in your life did you know that music was going to be your professional career path?
I started as a musician, as a drummer, and I realized very early that I'm passionate with music and that I wanted to find a certain way to work in the music industry. So I did a business school, and it was not the type of studies that helped us just to understand the business and understand this specific industry. So I did everything by myself, applied to labels. I started being a festival programmer when I was young. And this is how I realized that there's so much opportunity for me to be involved into the music business and playing different roles, but it was completely new for me, and I started from the bottom, trying to understand which role I'd like to play, which part of the business is interesting for me, and which one I want to play and I want to work in. So it's I've been working in the music industry for more than 10 years. Worked for all the branch of the music industry, labels, scheduler, festival scheduler, studio. I worked for a booking agency, management, everything. And at a certain point, I realized that the last part of the business that I didn't explore was publishing. So I jumped into the publishing business, created my company at that time, and realized this is super cool because you're in the middle of this creative area and also playing your role as you have a business role, also trying to promote, trying to help artists to get more visibility and help them, specifically the works that I own and I represent from my songwriters. So yeah, I really love this part at that time.
That's great.
Cesar, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. I wanted to ask you, what's the state of music sync in France? Is music being used more in media, films, TV commercials than in years past?
I think the music supervision is France is quite the same as it is here in the US, but you here in the US has a more the music supervisor's role is more considered as a very important role between the different industries. And in France, it took time for a lot of people to understand what's the role, what's the purpose of a music supervisor, and how he can help to connect the visual media and musicians, songwriters, artists. So I think you created this music supervisor's role, and friends got inspired by you by finding a way just to match these two industries, find a way just to connect and match these two industries by helping finding right songs to associate with the right image, and it is into advertising, into cinema, into video games, a lot of visual media industries. But it's interesting that I realized that 10 years ago, I would say, very few players were doing music supervision in France, and we have a strong industry, in traditional industry in cinema in France. But I think we have great composers in France who made amazing films. But the way you can also create original soundtrack and trying to have placements for artists, emerging artists and indie artists, it's super important for me, and I realize the impact of a sync can have for a career, for an artist. So I think it takes time. It took times for friends to realize how it could help a career of an artist just through a sync opportunity, just to help them to get known by all the country and yeah.
In France, how does it work with TV licenses? Is it compulsory, like, where they can use whatever they want without asking, or is it the same as in the U.S., or is it a combination of both? Because I know different European territories have different rules around this. Like England, they make a documentary on the BBC, they can use whatever they want.
Good question.
So yeah.
I've worked in the U.S. also as a head of publishing for business, and I learned that the copyright is different from France and the US. I will just try to simplify the thing,
okay.
but in France, you share, so the share of the publishing is different from what it is here in the US, and you have the publishing share, it is shared directly with the songwriter and all the right holders that create the songs, and so you have to, when you have a sync opportunity, you have to inform for sure all the right holders, and I think it's easier in France to clear because you don't have to deal with a composer that could have also his own share of publishing, which could sometimes be tricky because he's asking more money or so. It's a different split, but as music supervisors now, I make sure that I'm pitching one-stop songs because it's easier for me, and I know and I'm in touch with everyone that I'm working with. I mean, my publishers or labels or direct or the direct songwriters that I represent, but it's just making sure that either they control their share or there is someone that is allowed to control and control the share of their part. So the master part and the publishing part are for sure different discussions and different interests for the two parts. But specifically on the publishing, the copyright is quite different in the US than it is in France.
Okay.
Interesting. How does music licensing work for ads in France? Can you take us through the legalities and the approvals for that process?
It is quite the same as it is here in the US in terms of there's decision makers. So the brand is on the top, and there's agencies just below that prove the suggestions, the musical suggestions that I can pitch, but as a music supervisor, I like to have an important role in convincing the clients that the agency or the clients, the brand, that this is the right choice for them. Sometimes the agency or the clients have value that reflect the brand, and they want to find the right music in terms of mood, in terms of the image of the artist behind that could fit with the values of the brand. And I realized that it's sometimes important for me to try to take risk by convincing them that maybe you should think differently, not going to the easy path, easy way for taking and getting this track instead of another one that could change the image and helps the brands to touch a new audience, to touch a new consumers for them. So it's always a discussions that I have with them.
I have a different sub question with that. Do you guys, you at Royal Sync there in France, do you guys strictly work or required to work with French artists, or do you guys take artists from different territories and different parts of the world?
We represent artists from all over the world.
Okay.
I don't want to. There are companies in France that want to
strictly have
French, and they have great materials, great music that they represent. Some vintage things that they are the only ones who
that have the rights to that.
Exactly. Yeah. But I prefer to think globally and find a way just to why not finding a K-pop song to a French brand? Why not? It's I'm sure the brand could be interesting in rebranding the image and trying to be more hype by picking the songs instead of a very typical French romantic music that is quite
so you have the liberty to mix things up, which is great.
Yeah, and we represent, as I say, South African, Korean, Latin music, for sure American, different genre of American music, and this is what I like and I love it, because every time it depends on the music the clients and the brands looking for, and we try to convince them, take a risk. The impact of music is so important for the consumers at the end, and also for the purpose of the campaign. So it's important just to take risk. That's my opinion.
Let me ask the other side of that we haven't spoken about yet is, in France, what is the role of music libraries in terms of sync? How do they fit in?
It is important. It took me time just to realize how libraries are important, because it's convenient for non-experienced people that want music and that they want a license for the whatever videos they're working on, and they don't have time for finding the right. Finding many options. They're using the library services because it's tagged, because it's the music are tagged, the music are specifically ranged, and it helps them just to license this music because it's in a certain way cheaper than finding an artist that wants to agreed on giving his music to a brand or to a project, audiovisual project. So yeah, libraries are super big, but I never wanted to work in library just because I think it's great because they're amazing compositions. But I want to help artists that has also their own career on the side and want to help them to get more visibility through songs, through compositions they made, and through placements that I can make for them. So,
Okay, that makes sense.
What are some of the unique licensing considerations in France?
What exactly you mean by that?
Well, in terms of licensing material, is there anything that's kind of unique that might be different from the U.S. in terms of?
You'd mentioned the other aspect of how the breakdown in sync is different with publishing in France versus the United States. So
Yeah.
you talked about that breakdown being different. Are there any other considerations that you're aware of?
I don't think so. Just because it's, I'm not talking about the copyright way of the copyright, which is quite different. The way you see the split could be different, but the way you want to clear it is the same. You have to inform all the right holders, making sure they agreed with this fee and okay to associate this music to a specific brand. I take sometimes this example when I'm working with composers, telling, if you're a vegan person, you're allowed to say that you don't want to associate your music with fast food brands.
Right.
And
yes.
And this is what we call the moral rights in France.
Right.
And I'm sure
right. We have the same.
You have the
have the
same,
same
right?
thing,
So it's something very important for me. And every time when I'm able to be in touch directly with the artist, just make sure they're okay if I pitch to everyone and I can get any kind of opportunities for them. But if they say, I don't want my music to be associated to this specific brand because I don't like this brand and I don't want to be linked to this brand, it's okay. Just tell me and I'll take notes on this of it. It's
That's very true here too. There are certain artists and certain writers who I know, like in the United States, they don't want their music synced to liquor. They don't want it used to sell cigarettes. They don't want it to be associated with guns or with certain products. I know certain people have been like, I know U2 is one of the very few acts that won't license their music for any commercial advertisement, and they never have. The one exception they made was when they did original music for the U2 Apple computer. I think they played, but that was the one time that they created something for that, but they don't want their music used for that. So yeah, that's a very common thing. And what you call, I know people have not wanted there was a famous story that Baz Luhrmann, the filmmaker, told about when he was making Moulin Rouge. He said it was a real nightmare because he had to clear and get the rights to all that music. It was like 160 songs before he shot the movie because it's all on camera. There was no we'll do it later. And he talked about, he said, they asked him, were there any that you couldn't get? And he said, yes, and it required me to rewrite. And it was Cat Stevens. He couldn't get Cat Stevens because Cat Stevens didn't want his song to be used with this love story for people that weren't married. So when you talk about the moral rights, that becomes a thing where people do and don't want to have it used. Cesar, what role does budget play in your clients' choices in terms of music? Is that a factor at all?
It has a role for sure. It's just that it's interesting because the other day I was talking to music supervisors in the U.S. About the budget and the fee that they have right now for specific projects, and I realized that for me the fee in a certain way gets lower in globally, just because brands realize that music for sure they have to they have to give a specific budget for music, but they at the end they realize that is it worth it to spend that much money for music? And my role or role of other creative people involved in this in these two industry, music and audiovisual, is to convince that music has this power of giving emotions to the to serve the image by delivering strong emotions, and sometimes emerging artists doesn't care about the fee. They say like, I'll take any opportunity, whatever it is. It's 500. I'll take it. Okay, but my role is also to explain to the productions company that it's worth it. You have to consider that at the end you split this 500 euro dollars to different people, and for use of I'll say like a duration of 1 minute for use of 1 minute of a song, 500 into a big series, for instance, it's too low. It's too low. It's not enough for me. I mean, and so it's always a competitions that we have to.
Will you fight for those artists to try to get as much money as you can for them?
I know productions company have budget, and they have to they can change the budget they afford for the music, but at the same time it is important for me to say you can pay this amount of money for this use of music into this mainstream series or campaign or and this is this is something that I'll every time that I try to negotiate and have this discussion with the decision makers at the end.
How much of an opportunity do you see for French music internationally and for international music in the Francophone world?
So I think the world has been hit by the French touch in the early 90s, and by famous group that everyone knows, and now we have France is a multicultural country where we have many different genres of music and subgenre that are amazing, and we have very talented composers, songwriters that taking risk in terms of creations, trying to do crossovers genre, and we can see now that this is not limited to electronic music or house music. The hip hop scene, for instance, in France is huge, and it's I can't compare with the American hip hop, which is like you created the hip hop, but France has a strong scene of hip hop, and I'm sure these productions, this music can compete with the production from the US, and there are so many opportunities. I'm sure now to also promote emerging artists from France abroad through sync opportunities. So that's my role also, to try to expand awesome, amazing songs from French artists abroad. But once again, I'm not limited, and I'm not limiting my pitch to French song.
Okay.
We have a great French indie pop bands, but if the director or a producer wants a band from Switzerland, why not? I don't care. I'm not pushing for French necessarily.
Just for French. Okay. One thing we haven't talked about is the area just that brands more and more are creating content specifically for online, for websites, and for social media. And I'm curious, as a music supervisor, does this give you more creative freedom in your choices, in the fact that you're not limited in time or in the original music creation when doing music for those particular platforms? Has that come up at all?
No, I mean, for anything, any use, any license on web, once again, the budget are the budgets are very low right now, and because they don't realize that this social campaign can have a huge impact if they promote whatever short or long video through the socials.
Right.
But the music has to be paid kind of the same price for me if it is used in a series or movie or scene or whatever. That's my opinion. But
even on the web. So,
even if the web, I think like the web, they're saying like, oh, it's
nothing.
It's nothing.
Yeah.
And but the impact, everyone's using his cell phone and watching millions and tons of video every day. So it has for me the same impact as it is he has on in a movie. So So yeah.
All right.
I wanted to ask you, Cesar, throughout your life, were there any books or films that have really inspired you that you can maybe share with the audience?
Well, I really, for sure, I watched a lot of movies, and I was really impressed by original soundtracks from Tarantino, for instance. From also if I'm talking about original compositions from Hair, the band who did the original composition for the Virgin Suicide movie, and this kind of for sure we can mention Hans Zimmer and these talented and very famous composers, but yeah, I think music has a deep role into in the image that you and the project, the audiovisual project you're working on, and you can see it if you're watching a series and the music sucks. You won't like it in a certain way because you will say like it didn't touch your soul, touch your touch you in the earth. So it's important just to make sure that music is and the music you choose are so important because it elevates the scene and the story into the movie.
Okay. Cesar, what advice do you have for someone who is looking to become a music supervisor today as a profession?
Funny you say so, because when I was younger, I would love to have someone would explain me what's this
job.
Yeah. It's a job that no one's knows. You don't have school and studies that gives you that teach you what to do and the complexity of the environment. It's you touch legal, you have creative part, you have a legal, technical, legal and creative part. You have also a business role because you have to convince labels and publisher to work with. So it's hard, and I think it's a role and positioned in between, once again, two industries, and we are middleman. Middleman, yeah. A middleman. We have a middleman position where we have to convince two people to work with, and it in the interest of the final product, which is the audiovisual product. So, my advice will be: watch a lot of movies, listen to a lot of music, and see if you're touched by these emotions that the music can brings to you, and try to understand the role of each activities of the whole industry. I mean, understand what's the interest of a label, and understand what's the interest of a publisher, because at the end you will have a different speech to each of them, and you have to deal with these two things. So,
absolutely, Cesar, we want to thank you so much for doing this. We really appreciate it. It's been very, very interesting to see the contrasts and the differences, and yet a lot of it to the similarities with the emotion and the connection.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Very interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Very interesting, Eric. You know, It's, like so many others have mentioned, he brought up something that I thought was really interesting, which is the whole idea of how budget affects the choices that one has with regards to music. I mean,
which has been the ongoing theme.
Yeah, we hear that. I mean, not only music supervisors, but also people in advertising too.
Right.
I remember Nick Hosling from Walton Isaacson spoke about that, where he said,
Josh as well too.
And Josh as well. Like, when you have that budget, the choices you're going to make in terms of what you'll use, not only creatively, but actual
dictating the budget of what you're going to have to work with.
Yeah. And so budget can really make a difference. And Cesar talked about that as well, which was an interesting point.
Yeah, I also thought it was also interesting to hear his views on French music being used internationally, how that's starting to take shape, how more music is being ingrained into other territories outside of, France, which I thought is great. I mean, I think it goes back to the whole thing that we're living in such a big, where content is being created at such a clip that it is available everywhere. So the need for music is more and more important now than it ever was before.
Yeah, and if you recall, that's very true, Eric, because also what he said about music being used more in media today in France, we see that here in America, right. Where I know, like, in one of our episodes not too long ago, we were talking about how the whole concept of, I guess, advertisers, media using more unknown independent things was becoming much more common. If the vibe fit, they would use it rather than, I can't use that, or I don't know that song.
Right.
And that's becoming more and more and more common. And here we're also seeing, I think, one of the reasons for it, because the demand and the need for product is so much more extensive.
Hey, Insiders, thanks so much for tuning into this episode. We really appreciate it. To get show notes, links, and everything that was mentioned during this interview, head on over to our official website at MUBUTV.com/podcast/show notes. If you're enjoying the content and what we're doing here on the show, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts from. And don't forget to rate and review our show at iTunes. 5-star reviews are always welcome and help to ensure that our podcast stands out on the top-rated and new and noteworthy charts on iTunes and our space. You can also find us at social media at Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter X, all ending with the handle MUBUTV, which is spelled MUBUTV. Don't forget to catch our flagship show, the MUBUTV Music Business Insider video series, airing every week on YouTube at youtube.com/MUBUTV. This show was produced and created by Ritch, Esra, and Eric Knight. Theme music by Disciples of Babylon, and be sure to tune in next week for another episode of the MUBUTV Music Business Insider Podcast.